morning, everybody. Those coming in by live stream and here in the room with me. I am going to begin to set the tone for our discussion this morning on Respect Life by to listen to the words of this song. It's based on a passage out of the prophet Isaiah, and allow it to be a prayer for you. I will never forget you, my people. I have carved you on the palm of my hand. I will never forget you. I will not leave you orphaned. I will never forget my own. Does a mother forget her baby, or a woman the child within her womb? Yet even if these forget, yes, even if these forget, I will never forget my own. I will never forget you, my people. I have carved you on the palm of my hand. I will never forget you. I will not leave you orphaned. I will never forget my own. So we've got a number of new faces joining us this week that haven't been with us previously. I am using that song as the setting the context, setting the tone for each of these sessions on Respect Life from a different angle. The song says that everyone is precious to God. And if everyone is precious to God, then we in turn must look at one another and treat them with respect, dignity. So and we acquire our way of looking at other people by putting on the eyes, so to speak, of Jesus. And sometimes we get distracted by their appearances, and we perceive people not as they really are, not as Jesus sees them, but we're challenged by this Respect Life month of October to deep charity and respect for who God has designed every person to be. And that's when we come to realize that we are all God's children, all brothers and sisters, first and last, sisters and brothers in Christ. The mission statement of our Precious Blood Renewal Center says that we are a safe and sacred place, offering healing and hope, renewal and reconciliation for all people. A safe place for all people. That includes those still in the womb of their mother and those on their deathbed and every stage in between. All people are sacred. And so as we begin this third week of discussions about different areas of respecting life, today's topic is abolishing the death penalty. And I'm joined today by Jean Swymeler and Connie Swymeler, who have come down from St. Joseph, Missouri. Both of them are involved with Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And for you participants, I invite you to, as you listen to their presentation, maybe jot down questions, jot down notes that you want to ask them later. But before we begin their actual presentation, we're going to pray together. And Dennis was going to put that prayer up on the screen. It comes from the Gospel of Life, which was written by Pope John Paul II. And those of you who are joining us by live stream, I ask that you would mute your microphones. And those of you who are in the room with me, you may pray along with me as I begin. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are made difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and the sick killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely in order to build together with all people of goodwill the civilization of truth and love to the praise and glory of God, the creator and lover of life. Amen. As a way of beginning this discussion, reflection on the death penalty, our Kansas City province of the Precious Blood community a number of years ago adopted a corporate stance against the death penalty. The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches that the death penalty is wrong. And yet last year, our United States government restarted executions, and our own state of Missouri just executed a man last week named Ernest Lee Johnson. As a Catholic and as a member of the Precious Blood community, I know that I cannot just stand by idly. None of us can. So I want to bring this topic to our greater awareness. So Jean and Connie are going to lead us in a discussion of how they got involved in this over the years, and I'm going to invite Jean to introduce and begin where you wish.
Okay. I've always believed that the commandment, thou shalt not kill, meant that the death penalty was wrong. Why do we kill people who kill people to show that killing people is wrong? And I have the button here, and there's other buttons back there that you're welcome to take too. Pope Francis says that we must end the death penalty in his encyclical. Our Catholic Catechism calls the faithful to work with determination for the abolition of the death penalty worldwide. And we started our vigils in 2013. The evening before a scheduled execution, we would stand out at one of the busiest intersections in St. Joe, and we'd hold up the sign that said, people are Missouri's abolition of the death penalty. And then we would recite Helen Brujon's prayer against the death penalty. And I'd like to read her prayer. And I want you to think about what it says. We would, as a group, say this together. God of compassion, you let your rain fall on the just and the unjust. Expand and deepen our hearts so that we may love you as you love, even those among us who have caused the greatest pain by taking life. For there is in our land a great cry for vengeance as we fill up death rows and kill the killers in the name of justice, in the name of peace. Jesus, our brother, you suffered execution at the hands of the state, but you did not let hatred overcome you. Help us reach out to victims of violence so that our enduring love may help us heal. Holy Spirit of God, you strengthen us in the struggle for justice. Help us to work tirelessly for the abolition of state-sanctioned death and to renew our society in its very heart so that violence will be no more. Amen. So I also have these if you want to have those. 70% of the countries in the world have abolished the death penalty. And just recently, France did. And I'm still wondering why hasn't the United States as a whole? Whether someone receives the death penalty depends on many things. It's the discretion of the prosecutor who initiates the proceeding. It's the competence of the counsel who represents the defendant. It's the race of the victim, the race of the defendant, the makeup of the jury, and the attitude of the judge. And many factors come into play too. The five main ones that I want to talk about is race. 40% of the executions are Black people. However, only 13% of our population is Black. The other is geography. 82% of the executions happen in the South. In Missouri, there was an execution every month in 2014. And between 2014 and 2018, there were 25 executions in Missouri. Money is the third factor. So many people on death row are poor and they can't hire a lawyer, but they depend on the public defender, and he's often overloaded with his cases. Also the politics, so many times the people in charge want to be tough on crime. There's also many arbitrary factors, and disabilities is something that we see so many times in the people that are executed. 10% on death row are mentally ill. One prime example that Father Ron talked about is Ernest Johnson, who was executed by Missouri on October 5th. He was mentally ill. Another issue is also the statement of the victims' families during the proceedings. And that is a big influence because the jurors are likely to be heavily influenced by the emotional stories from the distraught and angry family members about how the death of the loved one impacted them. And I can understand why they want the victim's family to talk, but so many times it's decided at that time whether the person will be executed or not. Some victims' families may oppose the death penalty. Some victims' families may have no family. And so the death penalty is more heavily influenced by these statements of the victims' families than by any crime that's committed. And to me, that breaks my heart when you think of how that can cause the person to be executed. Someone that I was talking to about the death penalty, and they were still on the fence and didn't really know if they were against the death penalty, said that what made them decide that the death penalty was very wrong was all of the people that have been executed that were not guilty. And that's shown through our DNA. The DNA has proved that they were not guilty. And so if we've executed people that didn't even kill someone, that helped them to realize that the death penalty was wrong. Another area that I really think is important to think about is the seamless garment when we talk about the sanctity of life from birth till natural death. And so if we believe thou shalt not kill, then how can we kill someone? It's legally being able to kill someone. And many times families that have talked to us, or that I've gone to presentations, and they decide that, yes, they want that revenge, they want that eye for an eye, but that doesn't make anything better for them. It's the peace they have to find. It's the mercy they have to have for their fellow man.
Thank you. Connie, how did you get involved in this?
Well, I was raised in the 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And to be honest, I didn't pay any attention to social justice issues until I was a young mother, and the abortion issue was always up front. And so I was always active in St. Joseph with anti-abortion, and tried to do my part. But the issue of the death penalty was somewhat new to me because of my lack of awareness and my lack of paying attention to what was actually happening in the world around us. But it was after I became a companion of the Precious Blood, and the spotlight was more on social justice issues than I had been used to. And this is like 25 years ago. So this happened a long time ago, but it was still, I was still in my 50s when this happened. But when the corporate stance about the death penalty came up for discussion within the Precious Blood community, it was a difficult thing for me, because I just start at A and work all the way through the alphabet. It seemed like I couldn't, I had just been raised with the whole idea that that's just what happens if you kill somebody, or, this is the penalty for that. And the penalty seemed just unimportant to me. It seemed like just get the bad guy. That's kind of how I was as an individual. Then, of course, the Precious Blood and the corporate stance came, and I started to listen. And I started to listen with my heart, and to know that I was learning something. It was very important. It was important in my life. It was important to my family. It was something that was brand new to me as far as awareness. I did not sign the corporate stance the very first time it was offered, because I was just so completely overwhelmed with all the information and the way I was raised. And so I did seek it out the second time it was offered to sign it. And by that time I was ready. And some of the things that really made it real was that I really began to listen and pay attention and read. And the people became important to me. And like I said, I've been interested and active with the abortion issue. And of course, babies were very familiar to me at that time in my life. So then, this was a complete switch over to adult awareness of just people and how they live. And I became aware of the disparities within the justice system through education, and also that justice is not applied equally. And it seems like all of these awarenesses began to build a whole different attitude within me. And it was no longer just okay to be removed from that aspect of life and that aspect of social injustice. And so my place in all this, I feel like, as a mom and a grandma now, and a great grandma, and a person in the community of the church and the community of my city, is to be vocal but not pushy about this whole justice issue, because I remember how it was when before I was aware. So I try to be sensitive with people, but try to make when I'm invited to join in a conversation, I do that. And I try to have the information that I need in order to join into a conversation about the death penalty. I also stand on the corner through sleet and rain and snow. And my father Ron, he did too, and Jeannie did too. And Brother Daryl used to come up from Kansas City and stand with us. But those were during the COVID time, we didn't do that anymore. And we were hoping that there wouldn't be any more government sanctioned murders, and that we would never have to do that, because it's heartbreaking when you begin to listen and you know the story of the person, and not leaving out the victims, because of course that's a part that we need to be very sensitive to too. But injustice in any way should be intolerable, especially to people who are involved and say that they're Catholic or Christian people. I think that to sum it up a little bit would be that phrase that we probably use all too often, but when you know better, you do better. And we as a community at Precious Blood, we know better, and we're trying to do better. And so whatever that means to each individual, I think it's important, especially to me, to my grandchildren, to always be that person that speaks for life in whatever way it be. And when I was telling my grandson last night at the football game that I was going to come tonight and talk about the death penalty, he said, "I'd like to hear that sometime." So it, just to pull it out of the closet, open the envelope, and talk about it is probably the best way that I know in my life to work with this injustice.
Some years ago, the statement, which I think is on your button now, why do we kill people who kill people in order to teach people not to kill?
It's crazy.
There's something.
It's crazy.
The logic of that sat with me, and that was one thing that made me think about this is not right. I need to do something. And standing out there in the street corner, just being a public witness was one way of doing that. What you said, Jean, about the victim's family, that pain is very real. And so I really feel challenged also to somehow stand with them, to listen to them, to somehow embrace them, to let their anger out, that we don't shun them. And that Sister Ellen Prejean, who you referred to, made reference to that in her, I've heard her speak a few times. A light went on when she realized, I can't just stand with the person on death row. I've got to be concerned about the victim's family too. And that challenges me. And yes, as Christians, as respecting life, we have to really be sensitive and walk with them, listen to them. I'm going to just invite any participant in the room or on screen, live streaming, to jump in here if you have any comments about anything you heard said or any questions about anything you've heard said so far. Floor is open.
Well, Jean mentioned that only 30% of the countries in the world have the death penalty, 70% don't. And I remember from hearing about this in the past that, they're not typically countries that we would want to imitate that have the death penalty. So I looked it up. It's just a few of them, like Iran, China, Sudan, North Korea, Bangladesh, Yemen, Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean, those are the just a sampling of the other countries that also have the death penalty. Countries that we don't try to imitate in any other way.
That's a good point, Kathy. It's something we like to think of ourselves as more civil, but then when we do something like the death penalty, it's not being civil.
Yeah.
I just remember years ago, we had a presentation at one of our precious blood assemblies about, and it showed the victim's family and the perpetrator, and how they finally were able to come together and meet each other and really listen to each other. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we fail in. And I mean, as a community and as a person, is really to listen.
Mhm.
I myself, have felt like I wasn't listened to sometimes with some of the things that, I expressed my opinion and I was immediately put down, and the way I was put down was in a way that the person really didn't hear what I said at all. So I think reflecting, listening helps us a lot. If we'll repeat back what you thought the person said, rather, so you can know really what they said. But that one presentation where the family of the victim and the perpetrator actually came together, and I think Sister Jean has talked about that more than once too, how they really talked together and listened to one another, and they came to love each other rather than hate each other. So I think that's a huge thing, is if we really listen to that person that killed someone. Many times that's done like in a second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds, and they don't even have time to think about what they're doing. So, and what's happened in their life to lead them in that direction. The other thing is, the public defenders a lot of times could care less. They joke about these people like, you would talk about an animal or something. And I just think it's not right.
Mhm.
We see these big cases on television where people are real wealthy and they hire all these attorneys and they get by with murder, and it's all publicized like it's great. But the poor people don't have that luxury. They're just, whomever will take the case. And so many times it just takes one person really listening to them that takes that ball and runs with it, that can turn things around. So I think we gotta really learn to listen. Listen with our hearts, not our ears.
Mhm.
I would like to add my brother-in-law's sister was shot to death there in Kansas City a number of years ago. I'm sure you remember the case. She was visiting her mother at a Jewish nursing home there, and it was the same gentleman that shot at the Jewish Christian. It was like a YMCA, only it was a Jewish And the same man shot a grandfather and a son, and also shot up this Jewish nursing home. And he didn't even kill. He hated Jews. This man that committed these murders, but he didn't kill anybody Jewish. He killed a boy and a grandfather who were at it was like Jewish YMCA, I'm going to call it. I can't think of the name of it.
It's Jewish Community Center.
Yeah,
Jewish Community Center.
right. Because
They were having auditions for a play.
right. And then also and he killed 2 fundamentalist Christian Jews, and he killed a Catholic, is who he killed. So, my brother-in-law's family is all Catholic, and they were against the death penalty. This man was put on death row. And for a while, the victims were all, consoling each other. But the fundamentalist Christian family wanted the death penalty. And so there was a big split. And so they kind of felt, because my brother-in-law's family did not. They were very much against the death penalty, the Catholics. And so it caused some dissension with the trial and everything, but he still was put on death row. Well, he did die in the last 6 months. I don't know if you know that. He died on death row. He was an older man anyway. And there was some question as to whether he had mental illness. So he was not executed. The execution had been stayed, and he died on death row. So, but it kind of ties in with what Connie was saying. And I appreciated your comments, Connie, because we cannot be quiet, we really can't. We just have to be able to speak up on these issues. And sometimes it's just really hard. And it's hard because the same people that are so against abortion will be so much in favor of the death penalty.
No, that's what kills me.
And so it's hard to have these discussions with these people. And my family felt this, my family in Kansas City. It was a very painful time. And so they were sort of relieved when this gentleman died a natural death in prison recently.
The presentation that we had last week dealt with mothers who have lost children through either to homicide or mass incarceration, long incarceration. And one of the presenters, Maria Pike is her name, and the video is on our website. If you go and look at our video page, you can see it there. But her son was murdered I think he was like 21 or 22 years old, a young man. He was sitting in a car with a friend, chatting like young people do at the end of the night, and somebody shot into their car and killed him. And it took a number of years to act before the police finally found the person that had done the murder. And Marie had gone through many stages up until that time. But I think what she had found is once she actually saw the other young man who had done the shooting, he seemed so much like her own son that she couldn't advocate for the death penalty for that. And in fact, and by that time she had become active in gun violence groups and support groups for victims of homicide. And once she was confronted with the person who had killed her own son, she couldn't advocate for the death penalty because of that. And that caused some tension among the support groups that she belonged to. But she stuck with her, she stood fast on what she believed and has kind of evolved into someone that's advocating for social or for criminal justice reform, just because of what she's learned about the death penalty and about what people suffer when they're in prison. It was quite moving testimony.
I think one of the problems with the death penalty and awareness, and I know from experience, is that the experience of not being aware is that if we see on television, as we wish we hadn't seen, but in countries where a person is beheaded and it shows it you know, for the news cameras or whatever, there's probably nobody that's just not horrified at what a horrible thing that is. But we hide the death penalty. We don't know we don't know who the man is that flips the switch. We don't know who the people are that work in there. We don't know how it exactly works. It's all hidden. And so it's a violence that's very quiet. And it's not just quiet in all of the facts of it and how it all works, but it lays quiet in people's hearts because they're not involved in it. And I think the awareness of when they couldn't get the drugs to do these executions, people started paying attention to that. It was like, what do you mean you can't get the drugs? What is it that bad? And you know, people started thinking about that. But just because it's quiet does not mean it's not violence. And violence begets violence. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, I think, in a way, because it's just so hidden. And that's one of the problems. You know, I think if they showed an execution on TV, which would be completely horrible, people would be horrified at it. I mean, it's just like, oh, you know, that's just, but it is a hidden violence that is very secret and quiet, and that's a problem.
That makes me think of a presentation I went to. The man was a director of a prison, like the highest person in the prison, and he was part of some of the executions. He didn't pull the thing, but he was part of it. And he said after 2, he quit his job. He could no longer do that. I mean, it was just, I mean, he was there and saw it, but he said he was the director of the prison. There's no way he could be part of that anymore. And he went and found another profession. And I think too, what we were talking about when Father Joe Nazzle gave the talk on standing in the breach, and he gave examples of a family that they had, one of their children was murdered, and they had so much hate in them and so much revenge that they went to all the different places and watched the executions because they wanted to see that. And then he talked about a woman who, how we need peace, justice, mercy, and truth. And she visited with the person that killed her daughter, and she had to tell her truth. She had to say, you know, I'm devastated, I'm hurt, I want you to suffer because of what you did. But she said to have justice and to have mercy, she looked at this kid, he was 17, 18 years old. She didn't want his life to be ruined, you know, so she had that mercy. And she said she's working on peace. She still doesn't have the peace, but I think we need all of that to get justice. We have to have peace, but to get peace, we have to have justice, but we also have to have mercy, and we have to tell our truth. And that's what she did. She was telling her truth, how hard it is for her to give up that feeling of loss of her daughter, but yet she looks at this young kid and has mercy for him. And she's praying that peace will come.
Maybe part of our challenge is to facilitate getting people together to talk, victim and perpetrator. It's easy to hate somebody I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But once I put a real face on a person who's done something terrible, that's a real human being. With like what you just said, that's just a 17, 18-year-old. That's like my son or daughter. Do I really want his life ruined forever? But then getting to know them, I realized this 17-year-old has a mother. By having this 17-year-old put to death, what's that going to do to his mother? Do I want to put her through the same pain I'm going through? But as long as they're anonymous, as long as it's just statistics, we don't get in touch with our emotions. We don't get in touch with our ability to love.
I was always wondering what life is like in prison for a person. You know, that other piece of it, if, you know, you don't have the death penalty, but you have life in prison, you know, gosh, I would think, well, at least they have time to change, I guess, you know, and hopefully they do, but life in solitary confinement or something, you know, if it were me, I think I'd rather die.
I was involved in prison ministry for several years, and I saw a lot of transformation happen with the people in prison. And so the death penalty closes that door for grace to, you know, transform a person on death row's heart. So
Do they let you work with people on death row in the
Oh,
prison industry?
you know, I have never worked with anyone on death row. I've worked with people who've been there that, you know, 30 years, you know, so they must have done something, you know, serious, but not on death row. But, you know, I've worked with people that have committed serious crimes. You know, it's all confidential, so we never know what the person has done. But I've seen a lot of people have extreme change of hearts and go on to be, you know, really influential in the prison, like a good example for the other inmates. You know, very spiritual people.
So they have a life, but it's in prison the rest of their life, I guess. Some people. But it's another life, I guess.
A couple of thoughts have come up here. A cycle of violence just perpetuated, denying the opportunity for repentance on the part of the perpetrator. Both of those are captured in last week. The Missouri Catholic Conference released a statement that's from all 4 Missouri bishops. And this happened after the execution of Ernest Lee Johnson. And part of their statement said the following: when horrendous crimes are committed, it is easy to call for vengeance and retribution. It may seem the only fair thing to do is to take the life for a life. But the death penalty does not make Missouri a safer or more civil state. The death penalty degrades us as a society and teaches our children that violence is the proper response to violence. When someone is executed, the opportunity for them to undergo a conversion and repent prior to their final judgment may be lost. That important time for grace to work in the person's heart is taken away. The violence, the cycle of violence, somehow we need to stand in the gap, or whatever the words are, instead of encouraging the cycle of violence continue. Jesus definitely tells us, don't do that.
In the middle. So how are you received in St. Joe? What intersection did you say you stayed?
Belt and Frederick, right there across from Walgreens, up from CVS.
How is
Yeah.
that received?
Well, sometimes people will honk and, you know, give us the thumbs up, but
Yeah.
sometimes they no, they're yelling at us and everything. We say it's an alternative to the death penalty. We believe in an alternative to the death penalty, and we'll hand out the stickers. We have bumper stickers and stuff back there that you guys are welcome to too. There was a poll taken in the St. Joe area of those that were pro death penalty and against it, and it was pretty bad. Those for the death penalty, it was like 70% were for the death penalty.
Oh my gosh.
So, we have a lot of work to do, but we keep on keeping on.
I wonder if those 70% are actually for the death penalty, or they're just not for, trying to find another way to fix this, or, it's really easy to just think that you're right and say, well, I'm for the death penalty, because that's kind of the sounds like the right answer, but it's probably because they don't have anything else out here to work with, or to build their awareness, or they're just not interested in finding out. But what Father Ron said is so true, because that violence isn't just in these big matters of the death penalty, but it shows up in all our communities in a way that are just, oh, I'll get even with them, or I'll show them, or bullying with kids. It's the little things that just keep, that seem insignificant sometimes, that are shadows of this violence that we condone. And to me, it's subliminal, almost, the violence that is happening. And a lot of that is so protected in people's minds as, this is my right, or this is how you take care of that, or I'll take care of that, or whatever. So it's hard to identify how this cycle evolves, because it involves a lot, and I think it is a whole violent attitude about people.
And like you said too, Connie, that violence begets violence, but also I think it is hidden, because when someone's executed, you have to turn and turn and turn the page and listen, because it's just a bleep. It's not anything that's brought up. There's an execution. Someone was killed, because that is just, it is hidden. And I think that's part of this whole sickness too, is the part that's hidden from people. And just going about your daily life, you don't hear it, you don't think it, but like the poor guy that was part of the executions, he couldn't do it anymore. He said that was so wrong.
And, they're always wanting you to voice your opinion about, like this man that was just killed. Does anybody listen when you tell them that we don't want that? Do they listen or not? Would it make a difference if you got more people to say, don't do it? You had a mental problem.
I think it would make a difference in some over time, because if someone who is trying to find an alternative to the death penalty can influence 5 people, 10 people, whatever, in a year, over a lifetime, can influence a lot of people. So the more people that I think work toward this, the more people we can educate, you know.
Because they do, I still get the newspaper and they do publicize, you know, that this is coming up. You know, it's like it's not that we don't know, you know, it's public.
We probably will start back with those vigils eventually.
You guys, I wanted to ask, has anybody been to the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama? You've all read that book, Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. That book is fantastic. And, you know, the movie was based on that, but the book is has so much more in it than the movie. And it deals a lot with the death penalty and the mass incarceration of African Americans. But mainly it's a treatise against the death penalty is what that book is. But at that museum in Montgomery, Alabama, it is well worth a trip there. It chronicles the lynchings that went on. And then it also gets into the unfairness of the death penalty, and also the issue of the you know, he started a nonprofit called the Equal Justice Initiative, and that's what he uses to he has a lot of lawyers that volunteer with it, and that's how he defends all these you know, low income, mostly African American people that are incarcerated, many of them on death row, that all over the country, but some of them are just have lifetime sentences, and some of them are young. They were tried as adults and they shouldn't have been. You know, even in Iowa, we still have a problem with, even though the federal government said you can't give someone a lifetime sentence, Iowa still doesn't go along with that. They'll give somebody that committed a murder a lifetime sentence. They don't have the death penalty, but they'll give someone that's 15 or 16 a lifetime sentence, and the federal government says you can't do that. You know, it's but I don't know, there's some kind of a fuzzy part of the law. So those are the kinds of cases that the Equal Justice Initiative comes in on. And so if you guys could ever go there, I mean, it is such a powerful it's called the Legacy Museum. And it's new. It's only been around for a couple of years. So, but read the book first if you haven't read it. It's called Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson.
Sometimes as a mother, I also don't only think about that person that's going to be put to death, but I think of that person's mother. Also, I think, now if that was my son, how would I feel? And I think it goes beyond just the victim and the perpetrator, but on both sides, it goes through all of the family. I remember Father Mike Good talking one time when he and I were visiting, and he was talking about a young man in San Angelo, Texas, that was a known drug dealer, and he had caused so much pain for so many families in his drug dealing. And, you know, he was really known for what he did. And he somehow, and they never did know how he got into a lake, but he was drowning. And somehow he got out of the water, but he was dying. And one of the women at his parish was a nurse. And so she called him to come. And he said, you know, some people said, oh, you know, let him die. He's done so much to people and he's caused so much pain. And even one of the nurses in the ER said, don't call him, don't even bother with him. Well, she went ahead and called him. And then Father Mike said, you know, I had on my conscience that whether I really wanted to go or not, because he had caused so much pain, but he said, I knew I should go, so I went. And then this young man told them there in the ER how he had met Jesus at the bottom of that lake, and that Jesus had helped him up. And his life, it totally changed his life, but not only did it change his, just by him sharing his story, it changed several lives in that ER. So, we just don't ever know what's going on in somebody's life. And for us to cut someone's life short, we could certainly be causing his death to come about before that he was able to meet with Jesus. So I think that goes real deep, that if we take someone's life, we cut off their ability to ever change. Whereas as long as they're breathing, they have a choice to change.
Talking about change too, Sister Helen, when she talked, she said that if you're ever called up on a jury and they ask you, could you issue the death penalty? You say, I could think about it. Because she said, we need people like you, like you on there. She said, now I probably couldn't get away with that, but she said, you could. And that really hit me too, because you have to get on the juries. You have
Think
to,
about it.
because,
So you're saying they wouldn't choose you if you said I'm against it?
right.
That's
Right.
right.
So you can say, I think about it, which you would think about it and decide no.
That's good to know. I've always wondered what I should say if I ever was in that situation.
Because that could make the difference.
This is
You know,
really challenging. We're challenged to look at situations and people through the eyes of Jesus. And it's easy. Our natural reaction is, you punch me in the stomach, I'm gonna punch you back. You kill my brother, I'm gonna kill you. It's a challenge to be reflective, to think about the bigger picture. Who's all gonna be affected? If I kill you, how does that affect your mother, father, your wife, your children, et cetera, et cetera? It's all, so to step back and look at things like Jesus does, that's a challenge. So part of the challenge is to think and look at people the way, to value people the way Jesus does. But then some of the things you mentioned here is the injustice of the system that it's the poor who don't have money to to hire a good lawyer. There's a lot of prejudice. There's more Black people put on death row than white people. So as you become aware of that, I become aware of there's a lot of injustice that you just can't go along with that. This is contrary to what Jesus is teaching us. And again, what Sister Helen teaches and so many, and what we heard last week from the people who work in the Chicago Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation, to get to know the families and not just make judgments about somebody we don't know. Or like the song that I sang at the beginning, everybody is precious to God. So everybody must be precious to me if I'm an intentional disciple of Jesus. I'm not allowed to just write off people.
Well, I think I have a big family and they have a lot of variety of opinions in every way, but good books and good movies, out of things that I might get people. Like if this Just Mercy is a good book, even some of my that I know there's a lot of readers in the family with the time to do it, so maybe just trying to get under the wire just before you even try to talk about it.
Wasn't that movie Dead Man Walking?
Yes,
Oh,
That
yeah.
is worth always coming back to.
and that's Sister Helen,
That's just a help.
yeah, played by Susan Sarandon.
Yeah, there was a sitcom, or what do we call it, drama on TV. And I don't know if it's still on, I don't know the name of it, but a man was on death row that, what's the name of that program? Is it on still?
It hasn't come back on, but it was excellent.
Yeah, things like that I might get.
What was that? Can you think of the name of it?
I wish I could think the name of it too. It was a man, that, I guess, maybe he, as a young person killed someone, but he became a lawyer in prison.
In prison, yeah.
And then he's fighting for those kind of people as a lawyer because he got out, but the whole drama.
It was just on a very short time, but it was very good. I don't know if they've had it
If
come
you
on.
can think of the
again.
name of it, let me know and I can put it in the notes when we send
Okay.
a follow-up email to
And if
people.
we
Look
could
for
get,
it.
programs like that on TV, I think would be,
The part in that show you're talking about, when COVID came and they fought so hard, he fought so hard to get them out of prison so that they wouldn't die of COVID. They sent buses to get the prisoners out, and the buses came by and it was just black and brown people and black and brown people. You just looked and that's what it is, because that's who is incarcerated like that. Yeah, that broke my heart when I saw that.
but the fact that a program like that just lasts a little while, it shows you that what's popular. Studies,
Right.
you know.
Any other comments, questions by any of our participants that you'd like to ask Jean or Connie?
Our Father Ron.
Is there anything going on right now with the Missouri, whatever it is, Association Abolish the Death Penalty, or, are there any?
Yes, they have a monthly Zoom prayer vigil, the first Friday of each month, that I have tended to join. And they pray for, so it's a prayer over Zoom with anybody who's scheduled to be executed that month anywhere in the United States.
I think that's the Catholic Mobilizing Network you're thinking about.
That's right.
So how do you find that?
It's on the internet.
And what's it
It's
called?
called Catholic Mobilizing Network.
Mobilizing that.
Yeah. We just shared a video of them on Facebook. If you follow us on Facebook,
Who's
Yes.
us?
Precious Blood Renewal Center.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I could put all those details in the follow-up email to this meeting.
Now, most of us participating here probably already have, to some degree, been involved in our own thinking or actively trying to help other people move beyond wanting the death penalty. But wherever you're at right now, what do you see, what's the next step that you would like to make in your own life? And what do you need help to do to make that next step? Can we talk about that a few minutes?
Well, I was really intrigued by what Connie said. I mean, how many of us really talk to our grandchildren about that issue? I mean, that's really a big point. I've got a grandson that's going to be confirmed next week. He's a sophomore in high school, and I'm his sponsor. And I'm thinking, I've never told him how I feel about this. You know, our role as sponsor is so much more limited now. I mean, well, of course, I don't even live in the same. He lives in Des Moines, and of course, I live 2 hours away. So it's not like I've been involved in, and unfortunately, it's not like it used to be. But I feel bad about that, and I'm going to have to do something about that because I do need to talk to him, just like you said, Connie. And he's just one of my grandkids.
I can make sure that whoever I vote for is against the death penalty.
There's that Vote Smart thing. Does anybody get that Vote Smart newsletter? It's something my husband used to get. It tells all your politicians and how they vote on every issue. I don't know if that has that on it or not.
Who puts that out?
I don't know. But you still get information from them. Well, the Catholic conference, they let you know those kind of things, don't they? About how the people feel about the death penalty, politicians. Or do they?
Not probably.
If there's some kind of active legislation on it, they might. I'm not sure they do.
I'm sure they do on abortion.
Well, again, I think if there's active, well, before an election, they send out questionnaires and ask candidates to fill them out. So that would be covered in that, yeah. During election time.
I have in the past written some of the legislators, but with our discussion today, I feel motivated to keep doing that because I get tired of writing or protesting the way they vote or act, and it doesn't make any difference. Well, so I feel motivated. Don't stop letting them know.
We had enough people to do it, maybe they'd get tired of hearing it and change their ideas.
Yeah,
You would hope.
the squeaky wheel gets greased.
Well, that reminds me of in another discussion that came up, when you write to your legislators, tell them that I'm one of your constituents and this is what I believe and this is what I want you to represent me when you speak. And I'm just not coming out of the woodwork. Oh, you're one of my constituents. I should, if I want your vote next time around, I should maybe listen to you. Any other next steps or first steps that comes to any of your minds, or any suggestions, Connie or Jean, from your involvement of what do you want us to do?
Do you work with youth groups or confirmation groups to ask to be able to confirmation groups and things like that? Sounds like that might be something to do.
I think oftentimes we're afraid to speak up when we think someone's gonna be disagreeing with us.
Yeah.
And we have to have the courage to speak out.
Well,
When we first
It's
started,
easier to stay quiet, but it's not so easy to bring up what you think.
when we first started the vigils, we went, the very first time we went downtown, which isn't very busy. And were you there then?
no.
And we were clear downtown, not much going on, and we were kind of nervous. Yeah, we were nervous. Then we got to where we went to LeBlanc, and the students even came into the chapel and prayed with us, and we talked to them about the death penalty. And then we got braver and went to Belton Frederick, where there were cars going by. That's the busiest place in town, especially during the rush hours. So we moved along. But it was just a handful of us. There was only about a dozen is all we'd ever have. And we'd tell the people at our parish, and we'd tell the companions, and, you know, and we even advertised for a while in the paper, and we had some meetings at the library, which is open to the public. But it's really slow going, it's hard going, it's, you know, it's awareness.
I think that the future is probably will be held by the young people. And like Jean said, you know, presentations in our Bishop LeBlanc, where we used to go for vigils and talk to the kids. That was probably pretty meaningful, because those kids probably never even heard anything, even as Catholic 16-year-olds or whatever had never heard anything like that from the pulpit, of course. And so therefore it's probably not on their agenda with their religious education there at Bishop LeBlanc. So it's probably something that we could you know, work on a little harder to infiltrate, so to speak, into our Catholic high schools especially.
And we passed out the buttons too. They thought the buttons were pretty cool. They wanted to wear those. The ones, there were a lot of them that came up to us and asked for the buttons. So that was an awareness thing. I kind of forgot about that. That's been a long time ago.
Also, there's Newman clubs in colleges
Yes.
that have young people who are active and probably would be interested in debating this. You can almost expect a debate, but
And if you had, if someone did invite you to come, do you have, I mean, I don't know these facts, you know, but I was writing some of them down. 70% of countries are against. Do you have a
list.
like, if I would get invited to come to the confirmation class or something at Pius, would you have something that I could intelligently tell them?
Yeah, there's the books back there are really good too. Those books have things lined out very, very clearly about what some of the things I said, the 5 things that are so important to look at with the death penalty.
Feel free to take notes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I don't want to get up there and it's stupid. Which that kind of
Takes a while.
yeah.
I found that it's not so much the information is important to people, and especially if you get into a debate kind of conversation, but people, when you talk about it, people can tell if you really believe what you're talking about, you know, just by, you know, your mannerisms. And so it's, if your heart shows, you know, it's going to be a good presentation.
I'd like to reinforce the idea of contacting people who seemingly have more power than we do. We have a lot of problems in Illinois. And one of the things, I work with an organization that is trying to work on legislation for different things. And one of the things that just blew me away was in the state prisons in Illinois, there is no parole. You know, it's never offered. And so we started a campaign where we're actually writing to our Congress people and committee members of all kinds, state and local. And we actually have a meeting coming up where we're going to be allowed to meet with some people who have power in the government in Illinois and talk about the fact that we have no parole. So, you know, it's like when you get into prison, that's it. You're either, you know, there forever or you die there, unfortunately. So I was impressed by this group because they did such a good job of getting so many people together to write to people who have power, that it actually, after many, many, many months, is giving us the opportunity to meet with some legislators to say, what is this? It's not down the list is we have the death penalty, but for now, no parole. What does that mean? I was shocked and very disappointed that that was a fact. But especially think, I'm your constituent, your reelection depends on me as, somebody that's supposed to be supporting you. That certainly did seem to have an effect in this case. And I think sometimes, I did anyway, feel my letter's not going to make a difference. But if a phone call or a letter from a bunch of people is going to address the issue, it's more likely to surface.
Somebody mentioned earlier about, if they televised these executions, how differently people would feel. And I've had people say to me, they think, if they die from an injection, that it's just like you're going to sleep for a surgery or something. But when it comes to that death part, it's not like that at all. People's bodies jerk and they go through a horrible death, even with an injection. They, but it's like Connie said, that's all done in secret. So people don't realize that it's something really horrible to go through, for the body to go through. It's not just something simply that they go to sleep. It's like, an execution. Nobody wanted to see that, so they thought this was a more humane way to do, but it's really not. But it's done in secret, and it's so bad for the people that's applying that execution that they have several of them, so they don't know which one really did the killing. And that tells you something, that it's so, because the person that pulls that switch or hits that shot into the arm, they have to think about that later, and it bears on them. And that's why they have so many, so that nobody really knows. But I'd go crazy thinking, was I the one that did it? So it's really not right that it's done. What it does to the person that applies that, along with the person who dies.
We're moving close to the end of our time together. So any last comments or additions, Jean or Connie? Any last questions by any participant? And perhaps we're at a closing point for today. Thank all of you for participating, both by live streaming and in person here with me. And I'm going to close with a prayer in a minute, but first I just want to encourage all of you to join us again next Saturday. We're going to have another view on Respect Life from a different angle. Next Saturday, we're going to have Precious Blood Priest Father Joe Eaker and Father Mike Good join us, and they will address how they have made efforts to prevent gun violence through their parish ministries. So I hope that you not only join yourself, but tell your friends, tell your family about that opportunity. And today's session too, if it was a meaningful experience for you, it is recorded and it will show up on our Precious Blood Renewal Center website in a couple of days. So you can have your friends that you would like to hear what was said, tell them about that opportunity. So let's close today with a prayer. Loving, gracious God, you are the author of life. Every person is precious to you. Give us the heart, the eyes, the ears to see each person also as precious. Help us to value ourselves, that we are a beloved son or a daughter of yours. And as you value us, each of us, you ask us to open our eyes, open our hearts to see one another, every human being, as precious. Help us to grow in our love, grow in our ability to value one another, to show dignity and respect for all. Help us not to grow tired, not to grow weary in our efforts. Send your Holy Spirit into our hearts to keep us energized in this effort to grow the respect for all human life. We pray through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.